If you're a property owner and you've been given advice that your block is not big enough, this is an opportunity where you can actually subdivide, retain the house, and create a separate title. If you're an elderly person or a single person living in that big house by yourself, this is a beautiful opportunity to downsize, sell the front house, avoid capital gains tax, and then contribute to your comfortable retirement in your small unit.
This is the Build Out West podcast with your host Tony Hyde from Evolution House and Lawn Specialists and Catherine Smith from Build Bright Builder Brokers.
If you guys are looking to build in WA or simply curious to see what's going on in building, you guys are in the right place. We're here to give insight with professionals in the game, coming to give the inside scoop. Episodes are uploaded weekly, so don't worry, we don't skip a beat and you won't either. Like, share, subscribe, sit back, relax, and let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Build Out West podcast with your host Tony Hyde.
And Catherine Smith, good morning.
How are you?
Good.
We've got another guest today, and this guy, Peter Grant, beside me. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm excellent, thank you.
So, land surveyor, yes?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a licensed land surveyor. I've been a licensed land surveyor since 1988, so that's a long time. I still look quite young, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
1988, you started when you were 4?
I was still in primary school. But licensed land surveyors are the only profession in the state that can legally create and adjust and amend property boundaries and redefinition of property boundaries as well. So we do a lot of work for developers, architects, designers, project managers, and big-scale property developers. So we're a very essential part of the whole process of land development and building.
All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Peter, before we get into actually what land surveying is, because I know the listeners will want to know what it is you do and how that comes in, but we'll come back to it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your companies and that kind of thing.
Yep, I run a business called Naturalist Land Surveys. It got that name because I lived in Busselton for 10 years, so named after naturalist. Now I'm also developing a new business called Downsize Diversity, and that's using my experience and skills as a land surveyor and project manager to focus on helping clients who want to build small footprint, sustainable residential dwellings in the suburbs as an alternative to conventional urban infill.
Is that kind of sort of, for the want of a better word, the word that gets thrown around would be granny flat, that type of sort of thing? Or
yes.
Something similar to that?
Yeah, granny flats commonly used, but there's such a huge demand for accommodation. Anybody can live in a granny flat and they don't have to be a granny. So...
Ancillary dwelling, we call that.
Ancillary dwellings, there we go.
Yes.
So you had we don't call it granny flats anymore because that's just not good, right? We don't do it.
No. So there's a huge demand for accommodation, especially around universities.
Yep.
I think there'll be a big influx of overseas students again. There's a big immigration rush in Perth.
If you want to know more about that, stop this episode now, go back, maybe 5 or 6. We've got all the information there, and then come back to this one because this will make more sense to...
With the guest, Daniel.
Daniel, yeah, and he'll talk more about that and what it is, and we'll probably touch on it way later in the middle of the year as well around the influx that we're seeing when we've got some solid numbers around the immigration, because it, from all intents and purposes, is huge. It's huge coming to Perth.
Yep.
Sorry,
well,
that's just...
In my view, it's a bit too much at the moment.
We've got to,
Yeah, it's hard to really keep up with everything that's happening. And I'm finding, sort of like what you do and anyone sort of in development, it's like now the councils are coming a bit more on board and making, removing some red tape to get things moving a little bit more, because people were going further and further out. And now, sort of like you're talking about with the granny flats and what have you, it's just we have a lot of blocks that have a lot of land and we're not really utilising them as much as others do, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. So that's what I do with Downsize Diversity, is a bit of project management, do a free consultation with some owners if they're in the suburbs within reason, and then I will look after the process of doing the application and documentation and field work for the subdivision, which can potentially create a separate title for the granny flat. Now that presents a whole bunch of other advantages. So perhaps there's a single person or an elderly couple living in a large house at the front of a block. They want to stay in the community. They're not ready to move into a retirement village, so they can potentially build an ancillary accommodation in the backyard, move in there, and then sell their front house and avoid capital gains tax.
Oh, right, okay.
So when you say title, in case listeners aren't sure, that just means it'll basically have its own address.
Exactly.
That's exactly, and its own services and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can throw granny flats on just now, but they'd be part of the main dwelling, and you can't rent out as easy as what you're saying to do, right? Just so people understand why the advantages are there, because you would fence it off and it would just be like its own little house.
Yes, exactly. So it would have its own courtyard and privacy, perhaps its own driveway. There are other options where space is a bit tight. There's a big push by a lot of local governments to retain mature trees in the suburbs, and this is an option of doing it. So a small footprint building can be manoeuvred around to keep large trees. Of course, trees provide a lot more shade. It's way cooler. You can cut down on your costs of air conditioning.
Yep.
And if you can design a subdivision in such a way to keep parking in the front yard, then you save a lot of space in providing a driveway and a turnaround space, less brick paving, less heat, all these advantages of doing concessional zoning.
That's great. I think the next question was like, what do you do? I think you're kind of just really starting to jump into what you do and how you help. So my question would have been like, client comes to you, wants to buy this property and subdivide. What is a subdivision? And what does it do? Why do you have to do it? Like that sort of thing. That would be my question to you now. Pete would be like that sort of thing.
Most people want to subdivide to try and generate a bit of wealth. Regrettably, I do a lot of jobs because of deceased estates or couples splitting up, and they need to try and generate a bit of equity.
Yeah.
But it's also providing an alternative to all the expansive new suburbs on the edge of Perth, is coming up with good ways of urban infill. The state government is very supportive of higher density zoning around community facilities like large shopping centres, hospitals, schools, and especially new train stations.
Yeah.
So you've talked about Thornley already. There's a new train line going from Thornley to Cockburn Central. All that area is going to be upzoned, and that train line will eventually do a big loop right through Spearwood, back up through Fremantle. It's just going to provide more community facility for people to live in good areas.
I feel like you're going to be busy for the next 5 years. I'm going to call it now.
We're going to be busy.
Yeah, well, we're already busy, but I feel like for sure in the land subdivision space in Perth, and where you're going with obviously with your new business with smaller homes, there's just such a demand for it, and we've been talking about it so much this year, and all of the planners and things like that have been talking about it as well with us, the town planners. It's just that seems to be a huge shift in movement with that, where before people really wanted to keep those bigger blocks, where now it's like we really got to subdivide. There's just nowhere else to go besides up. But I think Perth is a little bit anti-up. We don't do a lot of apartments yet.
We're not there yet. It'll come though. That going up will have to come. You look at any major city, it happens. Right?
The choice is there, and there is on the drawing board lots and lots of multi-storey residential apartment blocks in some of those high density areas. South Perth, Burswood, along Stirling Highway through Nedlands. It's all going to happen.
Yeah.
Whether or not it suits people's lifestyles, but they will have that choice.
And that's it. The young professionals, if you look around the world, Edinburgh, the major city, young professionals live in 2-bedroom apartments and they're quite happy. So, look, we don't have that option. We do have the options, but they're not quite there yet. So I think it's only a matter of time. But one of the points you wrote, we spoke about in one of our last episodes about the hot suburb, and we talked about Cockburn and success, was we spoke about the Thornley line, and we weren't 100% sure but you've just cleared up where that's running, so that makes like massive sense of why those areas that we speak about right out that way are like even going to Gosnells and stuff, why it's so important that we're talking about these suburbs because of this sort of thing happening. The other question I had, and again, was around zoning and R codes and stuff like that. I mean, we use them quite freely because we understand them. But just for everyday listeners, why do we have R codes and all that kind of thing? What's the purpose of them?
Okay, so an example of an R code is, let's say, R20. Now, that's quite common, R20 and R30 around the suburbs of Perth. That means the 20 refers to the number of dwellings per hectare as a general minimum. And that mathematically equates to about 500 square metres per small green title or survey strata block in the R20 zoning. But there is quite a lot of flexibility in the R codes. So let's say you've got a block of land of 900 square metres. That is big enough to subdivide under R20. You have to achieve the average of 450 square metres, but you can go to a minimum of 350 square metres. So there's a lot of little nuances depending if you're R20 or R30, what the minimum is and the average. And then there's even more flexibility when you take concessional zoning into account, and even more flexibility if you do a built strata subdivision, which a built strata means the owner or developer is actually building units prior to subdivision. If they have 2-storey units, let's say the upstairs is 50 or 60 square metres, that can be added onto the overall strata lot size, which can then meet the minimum for the particular zoning.
Okay.
So most developers and property owners don't realise that that is also an option. Sure, it's going to cost a lot more money to build them first, but then that presents the option of going to joint ventures. They may be able to borrow the money. They can pre-sell the units. There's all sorts of options.
And that's what I was trying to, like, we have a lot of clients that want to subdivide blocks and they go, yeah, but it's a 900 block. But unfortunately, the house sits right in the middle. So therefore, it's 200 at the back and 250 at the front, and the house takes up. You understand that all that we're seeing, that all the houses that were built more at the front, they're pretty much gone now. People bought them and they're now in the process of subdividing the back of them already. We've seen it, and we'll get loads coming through for us, which is great. But that's the same. We're seeing, I've mentioned the suburb all the time, but in Gosnells, we're starting to see them buying up those really old houses, like the 150, 60 square metre houses on the 900 blocks, and they're just going to flatten them and subdivide them and double their money on it within a year sort of thing.
Yep, well, that's an option. But if the house is sitting in the middle of a block in an R20 zoning, that's where concessional zoning can step in.
You got where I was going with the loop there. You got where I was going with the loop, mate.
Normally you'd need 350 square metres in the backyard. So if you can't achieve that, consider concessional zoning reduces the 350 by 1/3 down to about 240 square metres. So you may have the 240. You can then subdivide on the condition that you've got a DA for ancillary accommodation, which is generally up to about 70 or 80 square metres, depending which local government you're in. Then all you've got to provide is a facility to provide access, services, etc., etc. So you don't always have to demolish the house. There are strategies.
So if you're going to do concessional zoning, let's say the house is 31 Smith Street, would it be then 31 and then 31A? Is that how it's it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So like service strata sort of.
Yep.
And then we spoke, I know I've known you for a while, Pete, so it was all good, but I was trying to explain concessional zoning and I was getting confused by it. So I know roughly what it is now because we've chatted, but at the time I was lost on it. And I think it'd be good if you could break it down in layman's terms for us, just for the podcast. We're pretty clued up in it, but really break it down on like what's the benefits and how you go about it and what it is, and just because obviously you've wealth of knowledge, you can literally hear it coming out and it's excitement. So
sure.
It's really great.
Well, the benefits are if you're a property owner and you've been given advice that your block is not big enough, this is an opportunity where you can actually subdivide, retain the house and create a separate title. If you're an elderly person or a single person living in that big house by yourself, this is a beautiful opportunity to downsize, sell the front house, avoid capital gains tax, and then contribute to your comfortable retirement in your small unit. It also means you can stay in your community where all your friends that you've had for 40 years or whatever stay in place. Now, the way you go about it is you talk to a licensed land surveyor first who's experienced in this field. They will check the zoning, do some field measurements to make sure you do have enough space in your backyard to comply with concessional zoning, and then get the process underway by doing a site survey, doing a design, organising a DA, and lodging a development application, which will show the floor plan and elevations of a proposed ancillary accommodation, and then lodge the application for subdivision at the West Australian Planning Commission, which is the Department of Planning and Lands, etc. Once that gets lodged, it takes about 3 months to get your conditional approval. Then you comply with those conditions, which is providing power, water, other services, vehicle access. You may need to do some retaining. You have to have a vacant block that is capable of development. Sometimes in some suburbs, there may be reactive clay This happens occasionally down in the southeastern suburbs. So you have to have a geotech report, work out a strategy to deal with that, whether it's bringing in some clean fill or excavation.
Yep.
So that's when you have to get a consulting engineer involved. So there's a whole bunch of conditions you've got to comply with. Once all that has been done, and I can assist with that as a project manager, then we lodge all the final survey documents, which is the subdivision plan, licensed surveyor's record of the work, and a bunch of other documents at Landgate. Everything is then endorsed by the Planning Commission, and you have a new title. So it's a bit of a process,
Yeah.
but in the long run, it can financially benefit people enormously. And it helps provide land and accommodation for a hugely growing population.
And is there a difference between subdividing normally and then subdividing into your concessional zoning? Is there kind of other not benefits, I suppose, conditions around it that you would not normally see between the two that allows it to be concessional zoning, like size of the house, things like that?
The only condition is the imposition of a restrictive covenant document, which is shown on the final subdivision plan, which it's a compulsion to comply with that development application to build the small unit.
Yep.
So they can't qualify for concessional zoning, create a small block, and then build a big 4x2 house.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So it is imposed. Fair enough. I mean, you wouldn't. Yeah. So that's really the only difference between the concessional zoning subdivision and a conventional subdivision.
And then, so would that be something similar that when you went to that in Hamilton Hill, we went to the what did you call it? What was
What's called Hammy Hill Eco Hamlet?
Eco House.
Yes.
And that was concessional zoning they done there, wasn't it? And they had a 3x2, a 2x1, two 2x1 double story, and another 2x1 going in on an 850 block or something. Like it was phenomenal. Something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, about 850 square metres.
That's what they
the
had on it.
difference there, it's zoned R40,
Yeah.
which is quite a high density. There was an existing house at the front which has been retrofitted, so it's super energy efficient. And then there was an existing granny flat, which has been retrofitted. We created a separate title for the granny flat
That's right.
under the concessional zoning. So the granny flat was only about 40 square metres.
That's right.
It's like a bed sitter.
Yeah.
But in R40 zoning, the minimum lot size is normally 180 square metres. In that case, we could go down to 120 by reducing that minimum by 1/3. So we're down to 120 square metres. But the beauty with the built strata subdivision, in that case, there's a whole lot of open land for trees and common garden in the backyard. A share of that can add on to the built strata title. Now, since then, 2 more strata titles have been built, a 2x1 on the ground and a 1x1 upstairs, which all have their own separate built strata titles. So that's the other bonus of a built strata is you can create a separate title for an upstairs unit. So in that R40 setting, they have now 4 strata titles, masses of beautiful open space, big trees, and communal parking at the front.
And the office as well. That's going to be turned into living as well at some point, isn't it? Those
perhaps.
talking about it. So
the owner's thinking about what to do with that, but for the time being, it's what they call a hot desk office.
Yeah. It was phenomenal to see the amount of space that it was able to generate, and it didn't feel cramped. It was very much a Fremantle vibe, very very cool, very chic, very hippie. So it was really cool. I was very impressed at it. I was more impressed at what you can actually achieve if you had the right smarts, but it has to be the right area. Something like that around the university.
Yep.
You would never not rent, right? It would be it's a $2 million project, I reckon, but your ROIs on it would be through the roof sort of thing. And that was an eco village, which was even more energy efficient, but you could do it with just normal sim panel sort of stuff. Anyway,
Yes.
I digress on that. But it was. We have to go down and see it. I was really impressed. I'm sure.
Yes. You want to come for a tour?
Yeah, we will.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's just to see the concessional stuff.
Yeah, no, Tony's actually talked about this a few times.
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
actually
it's really
he
good.
he gets so excited about this.
I love this stuff. This is why we could say we keep our podcast a bit short. Otherwise, we'd be here for hours talking about this stuff.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
So I'm hoping Chris Ferreira, who's the owner of the original property, will come on and do a podcast with you.
Absolutely. Do you want to hear that? Do you comment if you want to see Chris on here? I know he knows his stuff as well. He's good.
Yes. And his architect and designer who came up with the idea,
met him.
it's Matt Wallwork, And we also had some excellent professional advice from a lady called Melinda Marshall, who's a professional town planner.
Yeah, met them as well.
So the four of us together have created this beautiful example of excellent urban infill. The City of Coburn are super supportive and want to see more of it. We're doing workshops with the City of Stirling, City of Bayswater, to try and educate, I suppose, and encourage their planning officers to then encourage their ratepayers to do similar things.
Well, this is it, like, so to the listeners of the big investors out there, reach out to us because we've got all the steps. We've got all the professionals ready to go that can jump in there. We've got the town planners, we've got yourself, we've got all those people, buyers agents that will find the right property, and then we can build it for you. So you can literally just sit back and relax and let us do the work for you, because that's why we're here,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So yeah, perfect. So I think we're getting kind of end of the time, but I'd like to know a bit more like what you see 2024 is going to look like for you and what you feel.
Yes, well, I'm already getting quite exhausted in advance.
I feel like everyone's a little
I
bit.
know.
I've never been more busy like in December
know.
in building ever, and we're
Yep.
just, it's a madness. Everyone is constantly busy. I usually float around in December, go shopping a lot.
Just for
This one.
clarification, this might not launch. This may be like February, March when we were here. We record way ahead.
It's
of
like
time
2 days
because
before Christmas,
Yeah.
and I'm still talking to clients left, right, and center.
It's
and
mad, yeah.
it's just chaotic energy. Everyone's moving very quickly, and you have to keep up with everyone. And I feel probably you're probably in the same boat with that for 2024 coming
I
on.
think at all levels, from state government, the housing department are looking for ways of providing more accommodation. Local governments are doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of people in the private industry, whether they be builders or designers or architects. And we talked about SIPS panels earlier. And I think SIPS panels, and there's a few manufacturers around Perth, whether they're making them here or importing them, is a fantastic option for getting up small, sustainable footprint houses quickly that work. And there's quite a few examples around Perth already. I would love to introduce you to John Tallhurst from SIP House. I don't know if I can do adverts on here for businesses, but I'm going to be building a house using SIP House panels at Witchcliffe Eco Village starting in February. So I'm looking forward to that.
Where's Witchcliffe? Where's that?
Witchcliffe Eco Village is 10 minutes drive south of Margaret River.
There you go.
Oh, yeah,
So
okay.
it's like a world-class eco village, and I should come and talk more about that as a separate
Maybe
podcast.
get you and Chris on to talk about it then. That may be like a really good
Yeah.
eco-friendly sort of podcast that we could do. There you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of movement with that as well. Yeah.
Yep. Now, there's also other companies that are importing fold-out sea container homes. You can get that delivered and operational within 3 days on your site. And they would be using something like Surefoot foundations. So I think there's a lot of activity in that field. All these projects are going to need improved efficiency with local governments and state government. We need more people on the ground doing what you guys are doing. So that's going to be a bit of a problem, is that shortage of skilled people and materials.
Yep. Yeah.
That'll take a while to sort out, but if we come up with a way of providing more affordable accommodation as well, that might help alleviate that shortage of accommodation.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yes.
going to be. I think it's definitely going to be great around. I can already see the suburbs. I know that it's going to work closer to the city, the Fremantle areas, and all those big suburbs around there. Universities.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're great.
All the community suburbs, yeah.
Definitely, 100%. It'll work. I was talking to someone from the Defence Housing Agency. They will definitely be coming on for us to talk about what they need. Big things happening in defence in WA, like huge things. I don't even know if these things would be an option. It's something I'm going to float by and see if there's, it's just having.
But if you look in the stats of like Perth residential, 25% only have one person in their home, right? So that makes huge sense for pushing that ancillary market, because really one person only needs a 70 square metre home or less, but they're actually occupying 25% of residential
Yeah.
homes. So yeah, it's really just shifting those sort of small, single people. And I feel like with the aging population, that obviously will increase as well. And then giving the options for having those larger 4x2s with people with obviously more
I'm certainly
residents.
seeing more people come through when they want to build. They're not interested in the big 4x2s. They want like a 3x2, 3x1, something
Correct,
smaller.
yeah.
One. It's just an easier to they're going. I think, and I don't want to call it the European mentality, but the mentality we came from was buy something small, get your equity, then move on. A lot of the WA, and I think it's kind of starting to move now. As soon as they bought, because they could build for 400k, they were building a monster 4x2, and I think that
There was definitely
changed.
a McMansion culture for a while there.
A what?
McMansion culture.
Yes. I haven't heard that term
I've
before.
never heard that. That's
McMansion,
fantastic.
yeah.
I'm never not going to use that. That's the favourite.
Yeah, McMansion culture, I think, has definitely shifted, but more in favour of location, sort of similar to what you're looking at. So.
And I think there's a huge opportunity there as well for all those single people living in 4x2 or 5x2 houses to retrofit those houses, drop in a little mini kitchen, maybe a second laundry, who knows, and then another person or a couple or even a young family can move into that house and the original person can stay there, create their own space, smaller. That would be easier than building a brand new house.
Yes.
Is just blocking out a few walls.
Yes.
A mini kitchen might only cost you maybe $10,000.
Intergenerational living is obviously a huge touch point in itself. We can talk about that for hours. And sort of the one I was talking to you about in Beckenham off the filming, it's very much that intergenerational living. But that's for a podcast for another time. But I think we're up.
Yes.
We're going to wrap up now. We're good for times.
Questions? You got your questions?
You want to do some questions?
Got to do the questions.
sure.
It's our thing now. It's
No
our
pressure.
Thing. It's our thing.
Don't stress. It's very serious.
But there are
We're very serious
But
people.
there are correct answers.
Okay. North or south of the river, Peter?
Personally, I prefer south of the river,
Okay, nice.
but I think there's massive amount of potential in those middle suburbs north of the river.
Yeah.
Yesterday I was in Kundula doing some work.
Yeah.
Those older suburbs that once upon a time were not so desirable are hugely popular now.
Yeah.
Girraween, Balga,
Yes.
Westminster, Kundula.
I know.
Yeah.
The amount of inquiries you get for Balga now is almost humorous because obviously would it be, 6-7 years ago, no one would be interested. And it's funny how you mentioned that.
Yep. But I like living south of the river.
I'm also a Southie, so
We're all Southies here. Saffies.
Southie. Eagles or Dockers?
I'm a Dockers fan,
Good.
of course.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Purple Passion.
nice.
Yeah.
Right Nest or Dunsborough? I feel like I might know the answer, but
If I can afford it, I'd like to get over to Rottnest and I
Okay.
can just hang out. Dunsborough sometimes comes across as a glorified shopping centre. Parking's a bitch down there. But if you can get out of town, then that's all good. Up into the
Yes.
Yellingup Hills or
yeah.
find a beach where you got a few square metres. Who knows? But
Okay, and then I have two more questions. If you were going to invest in a suburb today, which suburb would you invest in?
probably Spearwood, close to the shopping centre.
Yep.
Eventually, it'll have a direct train line back around to Cockburn Central, Thornley, or you go the other way, passenger line I'm talking about,
Yes.
around to Fremantle.
Yep.
So it's pretty close to Fremantle already, but that'll just be an added bonus. Mm-hmm. And Spearwood, of course, is really close to the beach.
And it's still quite affordable, Spearwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hamilton Hill, one suburb north, has become pretty expensive.
Yeah.
The closer you go to Fremantle, the more expensive it becomes.
Yes.
So it's just a natural progression, but it does have a lot of good services there. And there's still a lot of older houses on bigger blocks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, last question before we wrap up the podcast. If you were going to build, which builder would you choose?
Well, I am going to build, and I've chosen Sip House.
Yes, we're going to have to do a whole separate podcast on this. It'll be interesting.
Yes. I'm not a big fan of double brick. I think just conventional timber frame with really good design and insulation is going to become more and more popular. It already is. You're seeing it a lot.
Yeah.
There are some big companies around that are doing multi-storey, just timber frame buildings. There's this massive building that has won some architecture awards built out of timber at Murdoch University.
Yeah.
Worth checking out. Sip House Sip Panels provides a quicker, well-insulated way of building small houses quicker, and that includes the roof panels. So you got to go through the same process with conventional housing, get engineering and energy efficiency certificates, but that's not that complicated. So you just need a good designer and shop around. There are a few different companies that do the SIPS panels now.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's why I've gone for them.
Beautiful.
And that one is what, south of Margaret River, you said?
Witchcliffe Eco Village.
Yeah.
Fantastic website. You just Google Witchcliffe Eco Village.
Yeah.
It'll give you all the information.
But where are you building?
At Witchcliffe Eco Village.
Okay, yes, yep. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Definitely have to check it out. Maybe we drive down there, but an excuse to go.
I feel like Peter's used this podcast to plug a lot of things. But
Well,
Right as well.
go on that website. I think first Saturday
it's worth
of
a
the month,
sponsor.
probably not January, they do a open day. So they conduct a talk and then they take you for a tour of the
Yeah, okay.
Eco Village.
Brilliant.
And while you're down there, visit a few vineyards,
Oh, absolutely.
get
down the
drunk,
beach.
build a house. you know,
whatever.
goodbye.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine that actually runs a little van business taking people for tours. So yes,
Yeah,
you
cool.
can get drunk and stay safe.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to wrap up there, but thank you so much for coming on. It's quite easy to see your excitement and passion around what you do, and your knowledge is phenomenal. I know you could talk for hours, and we certainly have on previous occasions. We'll definitely get you back on with one of your many featured things you're talking about. We'd love to talk more into it. But like as always, guys, like, share, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff for us. Check out all Pete's joint ventures that he's got going.
Yes.
I have to rewatch this and remind myself, and thank you.
So,
Yeah, just have a look at Downsize Diversity. I've got a website that is going to be improved soon, but that's how you get in contact with me if you want to.
yeah.
Perfect.
Or just DM us and we'll pass on the contact.
Good on you.
Cool.
Yep. All right. Thanks,
Yep.
guys, and we'll talk soon.
All right, bye.
This is the Build Out West podcast with your host Tony Hyde from Evolution House and Lawn Specialists and Catherine Smith from Build Bright Builder Brokers.
If you guys are looking to build in WA or simply curious to see what's going on in building, you guys are in the right place. We're here to give insight with professionals in the game, coming to give the inside scoop. Episodes are uploaded weekly, so don't worry, we don't skip a beat and you won't either. Like, share, subscribe, sit back, relax, and let's go.